It was a month ago today when a catastrophic explosion set fire to the Deepwater Horizon oil rig, killing 11 workers and triggering one of the nation's largest oil spills. A month later, the BP oil spill is still growing and rapidly spreading in the Gulf of Mexico. Heavy black oil can now be seen in the sensitive marshlands of Louisiana. Parts of the oil slick have entered the Gulf Loop current, which could carry the oil to the Florida Keys and even possibly up the Atlantic coast. At a congressional hearing Wednesday, a professor at Purdue University told lawmakers that the oil spill might be 19 times larger than BP's estimate. Steve Worley estimated the spill is leaking 95,000 barrels of oil, or 4 million gallons a day. BP has put the spill at 5,000 barrels a day. Also on Wednesday, a group of Democratic lawmakers called on the Interior Department to shut down the Atlantis, BP's second largest oil and gas rig in the Gulf of Mexico. The Atlantis operates in 7,000 feet of water, 2,000 feet deeper than the Deepwater Horizon.
To talk more about BP, we're joined by a former top investigator at the Environmental Protection Agency. Up until his retirement in 2008, Scott West was a special agent in charge for the Criminal Investigation Division at the EPA. In 2006, Scott West led an investigation of BP following a major oil pipeline leak in Alaska's North Slope that spilled 250,000 gallons of oil on the Alaskan tundra. Before West finished his investigation, the Bush Justice Department reached a settlement with BP, and the oil company agreed to pay $20 million. At the same time, BP managed to avoid prosecution for the Texas City refinery explosion that killed 15 workers by paying a $50 million settlement. Scott West joins us from Seattle, where he now works for the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. Thank you very much for joining us, Scott West. Lay out that previous investigation that was shut down by the Bush Justice Department that you did.
Yes, good morning, Amy. In August of 2005, I was introduced to Chuck Hamill, who spoke to me about employees and workers on the North Slope providing information that the transit lines were full of sludge and were likely to suffer catastrophic failure due to corrosion, and that then there would be a tremendous loss of oil onto the slope. Chuck made these employees available to me, and I was able to get this information beforehand. I wanted to get in front of that upcoming spill and prevent the spill from occurring, but I found that the EPA and the federal government really had no controls over the operation of that pipeline. So we were in a wait pattern. Finally, in March of '06, I got a phone call from the slope from one of these workers that I had spoken with, telling me that indeed the anticipated rupture had occurred and that a tremendous amount of oil was out onto the frozen tundra. We were lucky that it was wintertime because the lake that it got into was frozen solid and it made the cleanup a lot easier. Had it been summertime, there would have been a tremendous sheen of oil flowing into the Beaufort Sea. But anyway, knowing that these workers had information that the pipeline would rupture and had provided that to their management and senior management and nothing had been done, that made that a criminal negligence at the very least. And so I dispatched criminal investigators from EPA CID and sent them to the North Slope to begin a criminal investigation.
And what happened?
Well, as we dug into it, we realized that we had a very large issue going on, and that information that we were preliminarily receiving indicated that high-level management within BP, not only in the United States, but across the ocean and into London, were aware of the policies on the North Slope to forego maintenance in exchange for saving money, and that there was awareness at very high levels that this particular transit line was in jeopardy. And so that made the investigation become very complex and generated a lot of interest within the EPA and the Department of Justice of being able to get into very senior levels of the corporation and hold them accountable for their decisions, which led to the corrosion rupturing the pipeline. As we built up our investigation, it became very difficult. BP is known by its workers to be extremely retaliatory, and these workers did not want to lose their jobs or be blacklisted from other work in the oil industry, and so they were reticent about speaking with the investigators directly. Which caused us to have to impanel a grand jury and issue subpoenas for these individuals to testify. So once ordered by the court to come in and testify, they were protected from retaliation. So they would come in, we would interview them through the unwieldy process of using the grand jury, which slowed the investigation down, but also netted us a significant amount of information. In addition, we issued subpoenas for documents, and then in the response to those documents, we were buried. We received the equivalent of about 62 million pages of documents that were going to require a great deal of time to sift through and develop the leads and the information from that information.
Well,
so
Scott,
yes.
Scott West, in this particular situation, you had the perhaps unusual situation, or how unusual is it to have so many workers basically providing inside information on what was going on and the problems involved, but yet at the same time, as you say, they were afraid to publicly come forward because of possible retaliation. How frequently does that happen in these kinds of situations, especially with oil companies?
Well, it's pretty common in the in industry. Workers do not want to lose their livelihoods, and so they're reluctant to discuss openly about what's going on in their companies. I found through my career as an environmental investigator that it was often easier to get witnesses to give up information on friends, coworkers, and spouses before they would give it up on their employer. But ultimately, most people come around and do the right thing and provide the information that they have about criminal activity. In this particular instance, though, the vindictiveness of BP as understood by the employees and conveyed to the investigators was extreme, and so it made it much more difficult. But in terms of where my investigation was going, by June of '07, we had several investigators working on the case. We had several prosecutors from the Department of Justice, both from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Alaska and from the Environmental Crime Section at Maine Justice. A tremendous amount of man-hours were being devoted to this case. And in fact, the director of CID had told me about that time that the investigation that we had in Alaska was one of the top 2 criminal cases that EPA had at the time. So there was a lot of momentum, a lot of interest in this case. But by August of '07, something had shifted dramatically, and we were told by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Alaska that the case would settle out for corporate misdemeanor. And at the meeting that I attended there in late August, the question was asked, if we had to go to trial today, what could we prove? And I had to admit that a trial at that moment, the most we could prove was a corporate misdemeanor. And then I said, but we're not done with our investigation. We've only just begun. We need another couple of years to really vet this out. And they said, well, can I guarantee that I would be able to convict individuals? And I said, of course not. You can't guarantee anything like that in the criminal investigative arena. And so with that, they said, well, then we're done. And I was in shock. It's unheard of for a special agent in charge to be denied the opportunity to complete an investigation that was so far from nearing its end.
So you have the EPA considering penalties of upwards of, what, $800 or $672 million, possibly felony charges against BP executives, and they end up settling for $20 million?
Yes, they ended up settling for $20 million, and I was told there was a couple of reasons for that $20 million figure. One, we have to go back to the Olympic pipeline case. The Olympic pipeline ruptured in Bellingham, Washington in 1999, and the resulting spill of gasoline into a stream caught fire. 3 individuals were burned to death, and a stream was destroyed. That case was investigated by EPA out of the Seattle office.